The Arctic wind howled across the frozen expanse, sweeping over endless stretches of ice and snow. A storm had passed the night before, leaving behind an eerie silence, broken only by the distant groan of shifting glaciers. The vast whiteness seemed empty, lifeless, until a faint, desperate cry pierced through the stillness. A tiny polar bear cub, no older than a few weeks, lay curled in the snow, its frail body trembling from the unbearable cold. Its fur, once pristine white, was now crusted with ice, and its breathing was shallow. The little one had no mother in sight, no warmth, no protection, only the brutal reality of the Arctic's merciless grasp. This cub was dying. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Wildlife Legends and share this video. This is a story of survival, courage, and a decision that changed everything. Miles away, Daniel Brooks, a seasoned Arctic researcher, was scanning the frozen landscape through his binoculars. He had spent the last 10 years studying the impact of climate change on polar bear populations, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. A lone cub, barely moving, abandoned in the open. His heart clenched at the sight. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. He had seen tragic cases before, cubs left behind when their mothers succumbed to hunger or disappeared into the shifting ice. But this one was still alive. His instincts told him to walk away. Interfering with nature was against the rules. Researchers weren't supposed to intervene, no matter how painful it was to watch. But something about the cub, the way it twitched feebly, the way it gasped for air, made it impossible for Daniel to turn his back. For a moment, he hesitated. If the mother was still nearby, she could return. A full-grown polar bear could kill a man in seconds, but the tracks in the snow told a different story. They were scattered, frantic, leading away toward the fractured ice, toward open water. And then they stopped. A sinking feeling settled in Daniel's chest. The mother was gone. Whether she had fallen through thin ice or been lost in the storm, she wasn't coming back. This cub had no chance of survival. Daniel swallowed hard. If he left now, the cub would die alone. If he took it with him. His radio crackled. "Daniel, storm's shifting. You need to head back before it cuts you off." He glanced at the sky. Dark clouds loomed on the horizon, creeping closer. He was running out of time. "Make a choice, Daniel." The cub let out a faint whimper. It was so small. So helpless. Screw it. Without another thought, Daniel shrugged off his thick parka, wrapped the cub carefully in the insulated fabric, and held it close to his chest. He could feel the little body shaking against him, its heartbeat weak but steady. "This is crazy," he muttered, gripping the cub tighter as he trudged through the deep snow. The wind was picking up, biting into his exposed skin. He needed to move fast. The journey back to his research station was brutal. The storm was closing in, the wind roared, ice and snow blasting against his face. His legs burned as he pushed forward, every step feeling heavier than the last. The cub barely moved now, its tiny body limp in his arms. He was losing it. "No, no, no, stay with me," Daniel breathed, quickening his pace. He could see the outpost now, a small, sturdy structure built to withstand the Arctic's worst. Just a little further. As he stumbled through the door, the warmth hit him like a wave. His colleagues turned in shock. "Daniel, what the hell?" "No time, help me," he cut them off, rushing to the nearest heat lamp. He unwrapped the cub from his jacket and placed it gently on a thick blanket, his hands moving fast to check for any signs of life. The cub wasn't moving. Silence filled the room. Daniel clenched his jaw. He refused to accept it. Not after coming this far. He rubbed the cub's sides, urging warmth back into its tiny body. "Come on, little one. Fight." A long, agonizing moment passed. And then, a shudder. A tiny, gasping breath. Relief crashed over Daniel like a tidal wave. The cub was alive. But this was just the beginning. Because now, Daniel had to make an impossible choice. Would he defy the rules and try to save it? Or would he be forced to let it go, back into a world where survival was nearly impossible? He had no idea that his decision would lead to something far greater than he could have ever imagined. For the first time in years, Daniel Brooks had broken protocol. He had interfered with nature, and there was no turning back now. The cub was alive, but barely. It lay on the thick blanket, its fragile body still trembling from the cold. Daniel could feel its struggle, each breath shallow and uneven. He crouched beside it, running a cautious hand over its fur. It was thinner than it should be. Malnourished. Weak, ***. His colleague, Dr. Emily Carter, a marine biologist, stood with her arms crossed. "You know you can't keep it," she said, her voice low. Daniel didn't look up. "If I left it out there, it would have died." "I know," Emily sighed. "But this is illegal. We're scientists, not rescuers." Daniel clenched his jaw. What was I supposed to do? Walk away and let it freeze to death? Silence. The truth was, Emily understood. They all did. But the rules were strict. Polar bears were protected under conservation laws. Rescuing a wild cub without authorization could mean serious consequences. If they were caught, their research permits could be revoked. "Look," Daniel said, his voice softer now. "I just need to stabilize it. Get some fluids in. Then we'll figure out what to do." Emily sighed again, but this time, she nodded. "All right. But if anyone asks, we never saw it." Daniel wasted no time. He grabbed a dropper filled with a rehydration solution and carefully brought it to the cub's mouth. At first, it didn't respond. Panic flashed through him. But then, a tiny movement. The cub's rough tongue flicked against the dropper, accepting the liquid in small, desperate sips. "Good," Daniel murmured. "That's it. Stay with me." Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the research station, it was eerily quiet. The team worked in hushed voices, monitoring the cub's slow recovery. Daniel barely moved from its side. Every tiny breath it took felt like a victory. By morning, something incredible happened. The cub opened its eyes. Deep, dark, full of life. It blinked sluggishly, looking around in confusion before settling its gaze on Daniel. And then, something unexpected, it let out a soft, broken whimper and tried to crawl toward him. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "It recognizes you," Emily whispered, watching from the doorway. The cub, despite everything, was trying to reach him. He hesitated for only a second before lifting it carefully into his arms. The little body was still weak, but it pressed into his chest, seeking warmth. Trusting him, ***. And that's when Daniel realized, ***, he wasn't letting it go, ***. Not yet. Not until he found a way to save it. What Daniel didn't know was that keeping this cub would set off a chain of events far beyond his control. Because out there, hidden in the frozen wasteland, something was watching. Waiting. And soon, a choice would have to be made, one that would change everything, ***. The days passed in a blur of careful nursing and whispered arguments. The cub, against all odds, was getting stronger. But so was the storm outside. Daniel had never seen anything like it, ***, a relentless blizzard that refused to die, ***. It had already lasted longer than expected, trapping them inside the research station. Supply runs were impossible, and radio communication was shaky. If the storm didn't break soon, they'd be in serious trouble. But Daniel's focus remained on the cub. It had begun responding to his touch, nuzzling into his chest when he held it. A bond was forming, something deep, something dangerous. The cub should have feared him. Instead, it trusted him completely. That trust was both a miracle and a curse. "Daniel, we have to talk," Emily said one evening, standing with her arms crossed. He didn't respond. He was too busy watching the cub try to wobble onto its feet. It had never walked before, not properly. Not without its mother. Emily sighed. "You can't keep pretending this is going to end well." Daniel exhaled sharply. "I'm not pretending anything." "Yes, you are." She stepped closer. The storm will pass eventually. And when it does, we have to call it in. If we don't, and anyone finds out, we lose everything. Daniel's jaw clenched. He knew she was right. Keeping a wild cub wasn't just risky, it was illegal. But how could he send it back? To what? An empty, frozen wasteland with no mother, asterisk asterisk. As if sensing his distress, the cub let out a tiny, broken sound and nestled closer against him. Something inside Daniel cracked. He had made up his mind. "We're not calling it in," he said. "Not yet." Emily's eyes widened. "Daniel. Just listen." He stood, careful not to disturb the cub. "If we send it back now, it won't survive. We both know that." Emily looked torn, but she didn't argue. "So," Daniel continued, voice firm, "we wait. We figure out a plan. We—" A loud crash cut him off. The entire station shook. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. What the hell? Before he could finish, the power flickered, the lights sputtered, and then, asterisk asterisk darkness, asterisk asterisk. The storm was bad, but not bad enough to knock out their backup generator. This was something else. Something was wrong. A deep, guttural sound rumbled from outside. Not the wind. Not the storm, asterisk asterisk. Something else was out there. The cub, sensing the shift in the air, let out a frightened whimper and buried itself deeper into Daniel's chest. Emily grabbed a flashlight. "Tell me that was just the wind." Daniel didn't answer. He moved to the window, heart pounding. The snow outside was thick, visibility near zero. But there, asterisk asterisk just beyond the swirling white, a shadow, asterisk asterisk. Massive. Unmoving. Watching. Daniel's blood ran cold. A fully grown polar bear. And it was staring directly at them. The research station was deathly silent, except for the sound of the storm howling outside. But Daniel could hear something else, a low, rumbling growl beneath the wind. The massive silhouette in the snow hadn't moved. The bear was just standing there. Watching. Waiting. Daniel's breath came slow and measured as he pulled the cub closer. He could feel its tiny heart racing against his chest. It was terrified. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel, what do we do?" He didn't answer. His mind was spinning. A lone adult bear outside their station in the middle of a blizzard? That was unusual. Polar bears rarely approached human settlements unless they were starving or desperate. Then, the realization struck him like a bolt of ice. This wasn't just any polar bear. His eyes darted to the cub in his arms. And suddenly, it all made sense. Emily must have understood it, too, because she sucked in a sharp breath. "Oh my God. Daniel. That's its mother." Daniel swallowed hard. The cub wasn't abandoned. It wasn't orphaned. Its mother had been out there the entire time, searching. A lump formed in his throat. He had made a choice to save the cub, but in doing so, had he unknowingly taken it from its mother? The bear outside took a slow step forward. Not aggressive. Not charging. Just waiting. The cub let out a soft, broken sound, almost like a cry. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle on his chest like an avalanche. He had saved this cub's life. But now, he had to decide if he was willing to give it back. Emily's voice broke through the thick silence. "Daniel, we have to let it go." His arms tightened instinctively around the cub. "And if the mother rejects it?" "She won't." Emily's tone was firm, but her eyes were full of doubt. "She's been looking for it. It's her baby." Daniel knew she was right. Nature had its own rules, and he had already broken them once. The right thing to do was to open the door and let the cub return to where it belonged. But his gut twisted at the thought. What if the mother had given up on it? What if she no longer recognized its scent after being handled by humans? It had been days since they found the cub. Was it already too late? And then, another sound cut through the storm. A deep, mournful groan from outside. The mother bear. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't need to speak her language to understand what she was saying. She was calling for her baby. He let out a shaky breath. "All right." Emily blinked. "All right?" He nodded. "We let it go." Carefully, he loosened his grip, lifting the cub from his chest. It whimpered but didn't struggle. Maybe it didn't understand. Maybe it did. Either way, Daniel carried it to the station door, his heart pounding. The mother bear hadn't moved. She stood like a frozen statue, her dark eyes locked on the small bundle in Daniel's arms. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the latch. And slowly, he opened the door. The Arctic wind rushed inside, bitter and merciless. The cub shivered. Daniel hesitated, but then he did something he never thought he would. He whispered to the tiny creature in his arms. "Go home." The cub blinked up at him. And then, it took its first step toward the snow. The moment its paws touched the frozen ground, the mother bear let out another deep, guttural sound. A call. An invitation. Daniel held his breath as the cub hesitated, then moved forward. One step. Then another. Then, a sudden burst of movement. The mother bear rushed forward, closing the distance between them in an instant. Daniel's entire body tensed. If she turned aggressive now, there would be no time to react. But she didn't. Instead, she sniffed her cub. Nudged it. Examined it. And then, with a soft, rumbling sound, she pulled it close. Emily exhaled sharply. She took it back. Daniel didn't realize he had been holding his breath until his chest ached. He stepped back, watching as the mother bear wrapped her massive body around her baby, shielding it from the cold. Protecting it. And then, just like that, she turned. With the cub safely nestled against her, she began to walk away. Daniel watched them disappear into the white, a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak settling in his chest. He had saved the cub's life. But he had also lost it. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." He nodded, though his heart still ached. Had the cub really been saved? Or had he just sent it back into a world where survival was never guaranteed? There were no answers in the Arctic. Only the ice, the wind, and the quiet footprints left behind. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment, the storm finally broke. The sky cleared. The blizzard faded into silence. And in the distance, under the first slivers of morning light, a mother and her cub walked side by side, vanishing into the endless white.